Welcome back to Satori Sounds, the podcast that invites you to relax, unwind, and enjoy some gentle conversation. In today's episode, we dive into the fascinating world of circadian rhythms, your body's internal clock that influences everything from sleep and energy to digestion and hormones, as well as mood. Between jokes about silica gel and lizard people, we explore how light, habits, caffeine, stress, and everyday behaviours act as time cues that shape our biological rhythms. From sleep hacks around jet lag to habit building, as well as the messy reality of changing long-held routines, this episode unpacks why our natural rhythms matter. Your circadian rhythm is basically your body's way of keeping track of everything. When you go to the toilet, when you digest food, when you wake up, when it releases hormones, when you gain muscle mass, so on and so forth. It is a continual concerted effort from your hypothalamus. And effectively, don't mention the silica gel. Don't mention the silica gel. He's lost it. He's lost the plot. He's
Dude,
been
you
on the silica
can't,
gel all
you
day.
can't bring in the silica gel into this episode. You can't, just can't.
I didn't bring it anything. I'm just
I
saying,
did.
don't mention
You
it.
mentioned it. You mentioned it.
But I saw your face. You were like, I need to slip in silica gel to this conversation. I'm trying to give the people what they want, which is helpful conversation around the circadian
Silica
rhythm.
gel.
So you're locked into silica gel.
You know what I did think about circadian rhythms, though? You can talk about Actimel. You can probably get that in here for you.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because Actimel is ultimately about assisting gut flora and things like that, which, weirdly enough, isn't directly related to your circadian rhythm because obviously all your different organs are on a different clock. But what it does do is it does help that gut flora and basically create an environment where feces and things can be passed effectively. So it does, if you get backed up, that does throw off other elements of your body. So you might not eat properly because you're backed up. And when you don't eat properly, you might feel lethargic, so you might sleep a bit more. And then it throws your whole system off. And actually, that concept of sleep is a really, really important one. That's a very specific thing in which our circadian rhythms are guided by. So that's a loose educational tidbit about what they are, why we have them. They keep us regular, they keep us in time, they keep our body effectively functioning. And it's managed by the hypothalamus and something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So the hypothalamus, if you like, is kind of the person that reads the clock, and then the clock itself is that suprachiasmatic nucleus, which goes, oh, it's this time, so we've got to do this. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, basically, from a neurochemistry and physiological point of view. Again, it controls everything.
Well, it's funny how you have that little clock, as you say, for want of a better word, that runs inside us, controls everything from like our energy to the sleep, I guess, the mood, like when we eat. We don't really think about it day to day. And I only came across circadian rhythms when I was trying to fix my sleep. That's actually kind of my entry into circadian rhythms, where I was kind of waking up randomly through the night, probably scrolling way too late on my phone, doing some obvious things that now in hindsight weren't the right thing. But I looked into it to kind of work out, well, why am I potentially struggling to sleep? And I came across some kind of online information that was talking around focusing on how important bright daylight was first thing in the morning and how that can impact your circadian rhythm. And I was like, what on earth is a circadian rhythm? And that was my understanding, was that it was this kind of clock which doesn't run on the 24-hour cycle that we run on, but broadly speaking will do. It runs on that cycle in that sense and affects us day to day. And the more I went into it, I suddenly realized how this modern world that we now live in, how it's actually impacts us massively. Simple things like turning lights down of an evening. I noticed between getting bright sunlight in the morning and turning lights down in the evening, the immediate effect within a week or so that had on my ability to fall into sleep.
You're talking about something called zeitgebers, and these are basically cues. They could be kind of external and they can also be internal cues that basically signal our body to start doing things. So, for instance, the bright light in the morning, what that does is it hits a cell at the back of your eye, and triggers cortisol release. So you have melatonin and cortisol. Cortisol wakes you up. And it's why sometimes people report being more anxious in the morning, and it's because you've got an increase of the hormone cortisol.
Stress hormone, yeah.
And it's a stress hormone. So, and ultimately, when you've got that pumping through your system, you're not supposed to sleep. It's a survival hormone, almost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it wakes you up. It's very useful to do that. So that's what that light is. It's that German word zeitgeber, which means time giver. So it's a cue, effectively, to get up, to go to sleep and stuff like that. And so you have to think about zeitgebers in this context. What are the things that will be impacting my circadian rhythm? So like the blue light from the screen, and we're talking in context of sleep at the moment, but it could be anything, like the cup of coffee that you're going to drink. So that's going to bind with your adenosine and stop you feeling sleep pressure. It's going to maybe affect when you need to pee because it's a diuretic. And I suppose what we're beginning to think about now is how you access that. And it's this behavioural approach rather than unless you're going to start taking prescribed drugs or hormone treatments or things like that, you're not really going to be able to alter your physiology. So you have to do it through your behaviour. And that's what we're thinking about now. What behaviours and things are we engaging with at the moment that basically affect other aspects of our circadian rhythm? And don't say silica gel.
But you're right, and you realise once you start to unpack that, how many other things that kind of impacted from it. Because like I said, my angle started with sleep, but caffeine was another one. I still used to get up. I got, I fixed the light problem, no problem at all. I'm now fine. And then I was like, I'm getting a crash late morning. Like, what the hell's this coming from? Yeah. Looked into it, and it was like actually potentially, and it did seem to be correlated, was what you're talking about with the receptors being blocked off by having caffeine early, and by delaying the caffeine for like 2 hours after getting up, I noted less and less I was having a crash. And that really, the energy, I think, for me, from A, having good quality sleep, but B, learning my energy levels, or when I felt kind of more energetic to do things, was another big impact that I saw from just becoming more aware of the circadian rhythm. And when I was looking into it, I thought, well, does that mean everyone's is kind of the same? But then you kind of go on to the point of like, you've got night workers. How does their circadian rhythm work? And actually, as you say, it's these our own internal kind of clocks that can adjust. And that's also where we find jet lag and other issues, because our rhythm's out, etc. And how over time, I guess, everyone's has been adapted, and we're all individual as much as we're saying there is this one clock.
It is interesting because when we say that everyone's circadian rhythm is different, we all have different behaviours. And also, in addition to that, there are a number of, I suppose, individual factors that will impact upon that. So like corticosteroids, for instance, how stressed are you? Because that will impact. And that's going to vary from the one person to the next. But you do have moments with people that have sort of shared schedules. Their circadian rhythms do sort of line up to some degree, unless they vary their behaviour. If they're doing a lot of similar things, if they're going to bed at the same time, they're waking up at the same time, they're having lunch at the same time, their bodies adapt and they begin to sort of share that together. So everyone's is different, but what we're really noting is how much our behaviour impacts on that. And it comes back to something we spoke about a little while ago. So habits. Habits affect your circadian rhythm massively just because of the repeated behaviors that you do. So, for instance, I remember I used to work with someone, and we also used to deliver all sorts of treatments to people, but she said to me she couldn't sleep. And this person also delivered sleep hygiene. And I just asked her one day, well, what do you do to go to sleep? Oh, well, I come home after work about 6 o'clock, I eat dinner, stuff like that. And at 9 o'clock, I have 2 glasses of Coca-Cola. So we had a similar sort of routine and schedule, but the difference is I didn't sit there and drink caffeine just before bed. So I didn't have caffeine binding to adenosine, which is the chemical, the way that lets you feel sleep pressure. And I suppose that's what you've got to bear in mind. There are habits and lifestyle choices as well as lifestyle events that will affect different aspects of your circadian rhythm. Like when you eat, if you're really stressed, you don't eat, as well as not sleeping. And it does also affect things like sex drive and when you have physical energy and want to work out and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, the working out thing was really interesting as well, actually. Like I was really looking into, well, okay, if the circadian rhythm affects sleep and your behaviours affect it, what else does it? And I mean, the studies over, I think, fitness are slightly less than they are with the sleep, but I reckon from what I've seen, how connected your circadian rhythm is to everything. And I personally find that I work out better in the afternoon than I do the morning. And actually, for me, that's because my body just wasn't awake and the chemicals and everything wasn't firing first thing in the morning. I just couldn't get going that quickly, whereas other people can.
Mm. But inversely, if you started to do that in the morning, your energy levels would increase in the morning. Bodies adapt, and
Yeah.
that's the point. It's not. So you can sit there and be like, "Oh, I really struggle to say work out or get up in the morning." If you started to wake up in the morning, going to bed at the same time, you will adapt. It will be difficult at first, but that's how it works. Your circadian
Yeah.
clock and rhythm changes.
Exactly. And I think the best example of that is jet lag. Like I was looking at, well, how do, if you're kind of, going to a different time zone, obviously you feel jet lag and that relates to your circadian rhythm. And I think it was Andrew Huberman who put a post up about it. And it was like, if you're going on a long haul flight and for instance, you're going to be staying up later, well, before you go, start staying up a little later, 15 minutes each night. And you should notice that actually you'll have less of what we call jet lag because to your point exactly there, your circadian rhythm is adjusting to the behaviours and realising, well, we're going to bed later, so we need to just balance this back out.
Mm. Yeah, and I think there's been some studies interesting, and was focusing a lot about sleep. And it's interesting because sleep is kind of one of the biggest things that guides us circadian rhythm from the moment we wake up, as well as when we're actually in sleep. So you mentioned our body's not 24 hours. Well, it is. The clock is going. It's doing things like, okay, we need to think about your wake sleep cycle. It is releasing hormones for you to get up and kind of go again.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot more studies about sleep credit and sleep debt and how you can end up in sleep credit when you're doing certain things. And that's why you might feel less tired, as well as sleep debt. If you've stayed up a few days in a row and you're still tired after a good night's sleep, it's because your body's not quite rested enough. And these things now, they seem like common sense, but we have to validate them, I suppose, in research. And I think that's the interesting thing about neuroscience, because we've had lots of cognitive models. So like a cognitive model of depression, for instance, has represented that element of your circadian rhythm. When you say, people commonly when they're depressed report feeling tired, and so they do less. And then because they do less, their body naturally reduces the energy that they need to do things, and then they feel worse. Well, now we've got that physiological link really well established because of that neuroscientific component of actually energy levels and what people do. So the recommendation is you need to do more. Even though you don't feel like it and you feel tired, you'll feel less tired in the end because your body comes to match that. And it's that sort of thinking that we've come away from or with in the last, I'd say, 15, 20 years.
I can see the correlation to that. And I think fitness is the easiest one I can align that to. Like from being more active, you feel like you've got more energy and you can focus on other things. And it's just this constant, it comes from the habits as we're talking about stacking it, but the more you do, you have more energy. And that plays to that point that you're kind of saying there, that it unlocks it and builds it up. In that sense. But I think those cues, I'd say, is probably a good starting point for people. Yeah. But for people to start to understand that, if you're really new to circadian rhythm from a wellbeing perspective, I think starting to work out maybe what some of those cues are, and to the point, there's so much neuroscience out there now. There's probably a lot that you could just get straight away to give you some guidance as to where and what they might be.
I mean, some really basic things to think about, and this is emerged out of a lot of sleep studies. It's what we call bioassociation, where our body associates certain things. So like bed, for instance, if we are in bed playing lots of video games and we're not sleeping, or perhaps we're reading a lot, watching TV, our body starts to associate that space with doing those things. So we'll be less likely to sleep. And it's the same. If you start sleeping in your armchair, your body goes, oh, we're in this armchair. We know what this position, literally just out cold. And the problem is when you do that, your body then goes, oh, we've slept a lot today. But it's also the same with eating, working out, all these different things your body associates. And it is so, that's the interesting thing. These are discoveries that we're now beginning to use and implement in everyday sort of well-being. And they seem like common sense, but people weren't sure 20, 30 years ago. And now we can quite confidently say that's what's going on.
And 100%, because if I look back to habits, one of the things that in the Atomic Habits book I read was talking about designing your environment. And your exact point, don't play games at the same desk that you do work at because your brain isn't going to be there, or don't sit in bed and doom scroll because you're not fun enough, not going to sleep.
Yeah.
And putting the phone out the room, bang, I hit the pillow, 2 minutes out, no problem.
What do you mean doom scrolling doesn't help me sleep? I just need the right amount of existential dread to go to sleep. I need to doom scroll. That's what I have to do. But you're right. And if we talk about it from a purely physiological point of view, even with the low light setting on your phone, it's producing a lot of stimulation, blue light contact, and it is waking you up. And I think now might also be a good time to mention, we're talking about kind of these physiological, biological, and kind of also cognitive associations. But if you have a health condition, again, if you've got an endocrine issue, maybe you have a problem with your thyroid, perhaps you have an issue with your adrenal gland or pituitary gland, anything like that, maybe a TBI, you've got to bear in mind this advice might not be as helpful to you because it's very general, and this discussion point might not be so helpful. So it's just to hold that in mind. It's not cross-applicable because there's lots of things that influence your circadian rhythm, like how stressed you feel. Like if you're living in an environment where, so like in the middle of the city, and there's lots and lots of noise, it doesn't matter how good your sleep hygiene is. If there's people making noise out and about, you might struggle to sleep. And that's not necessarily anything to do with your circadian rhythm, but more to do with your environment. So it's considering that as well in the broad conversation.
No, I think it's a really good point because it's so multifaceted and multi-layered, right? We've talked about circadian rhythm, habits, neuroscience. Like it's interesting how it is also connected and that natural rhythm and operating system, but how easily things can be affected. So I think you're right in that sense to kind of to start from that perspective. From there, I think the natural rhythm piece I think has been really interesting for me. You know, you talked about well, actually you can change it, and that kind of links back to habits. But the natural rhythm and realizing where your natural peaks and troughs were. I did a really interesting exercise generally that kind of linked to this, but more my energy levels generally. I just monitored where my natural energy peaks and troughs were throughout the day, and that was like another layer that I took to it. And I that's when I started to realize there was the dip. Late morning related to coffee. I also had another one that we've talked about in the habits episode, which was early afternoon. And actually, it wasn't that I was hungry. I was just bored sitting on a laptop and wanted a break. So there's, as you say, there's these things there's layers to this. It's not just, you've got a problem with circadian rhythm. There's other things that you might need to be aware of. But I think tuning into those natural peaks and troughs is really helpful.
To be frank, because it's a behavioural approach, it's uncomfortable. You have to consider where you're the problem.
Yeah.
That sounds really crass.
I'm never
but actually,
the problem,
if you're
Joshua.
doing things... the problem right now, you keep talking about silica gel. I don't know why you keep bringing it up. So odd. But you do have to consider that actually, if you're doing things that are counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve, so if you're trying to go to sleep, don't drink 2 glasses of Coke. That's not going to help you. It's just not. Or, you know, if you're trying to say, I don't know, what's another good example? Trying to help with your muscle growth and stuff like that, you've got to think about what you're putting in your body in terms of supplements or even steroids. It's a careful balance of systems, generally speaking, that you can affect with your behavior, but you have to bear in mind what you're doing will have another knock-on effect.
Yeah, it's all intrinsically linked in that sense, isn't it? But I also think you'll find once you find more of a better rhythm, you know, you're talking about stress and anxiety first thing, but I think once you find a more natural rhythm and you're more in balance, I found that I was generally a little more less stressed anyway, because I felt like I was getting good sleep, you know, like I think there's just that natural point around the chemicals again, but like I felt like I was getting good sleep. I was eating well. I was, you know, it has a cumulative effect. And now I'm so aware of it in a sense that like I know if I've spent an evening accidentally spending, I don't know, the hour before bed doom scrolling instead of reading a book, I generally am like almost too attuned to it the other way now. I'm like, no, I'm not going to get a good night's sleep. So you can go the other end, I think, of over-analysing it slightly, because actually one night isn't going to kill me.
Well, you're doing the top-down processing bit there that we spoke about off screen. You're almost over-attending to it, and that's something you've got to consider. And we're not just talking about physiology. there is a whole cognitive layer. You're not just a series of wires and circuits and blood and vessels and hormone release. There is another aspect about it, that you've got this massive part of your brain that does thinking. So it's not just the hypothalamus and the SCN, which is that suprachiasmatic nucleus. There's this part of you that then will generate worry, that will start to worry about things like, oh no, I've read too much, I'm not going to be able to sleep. So there is that other layer to it. So you got to balance it a little bit realistically, that you're not just, if it was that simple, it'd be very reductionist. It would be wonderful if we were that simple. We're not. We're complex beings.
We are. But I think it's a real key point, right? And actually, when I was listening to an episode of Andrew even talking about it, he even admitted, because they were like, wow, so you do all these amazing things where, like, you know, you get up early and you first get daylight, you delay caffeine for 2 hours, you know, in the evening you come off screens an hour before bed, you don't eat 4 hours before you go to bed, low light, you know, this whole thing. And he's like, yeah, but one day a week I just don't do any of it. You know,
it's also, I mean, that perspective of, oh, I'm avoiding low light, you got to be realistic. That's not going to be true for everyone. You're not going to be able to avoid low light. You just aren't. You ever been in an NHS building where the lights are on top of you buzzing? If you've got a nighttime appointment or something like that, you're not going to avoid the low light. You ever been driving at night where a car flashes into your car? You're not avoiding low light. And I think I like Huberman's stance. He makes a lot of sense, but realistically, there are just things that are not practical. And I think you have to bear that in mind when you're making massive changes to your environment. And it's a bit like what we were talking about with food. You consider, like, I only want to eat the rawest, cleanest food. Great. Good luck trying to find it. Because the world you live in doesn't look like that.
But the world bit, I think, comes into this circadian rhythm massively, to your point again, is that actually there are some external factors, as you say. Like, if you live in the middle of nowhere in the woods, it's going to be really easy to not get affected, right?
Yeah.
But most people have streetlights, right? They're not going to be able to. But actually, maybe you can get a darker blind, more of a blackout blind, right? Or the light bulbs in your house, learn to use side lights instead of bright lights, right? So you're not going to be able to necessarily define this all perfectly. It's not a playbook that says do exactly this and everything will be perfect. But it is, I think, to that point that actually you've got to make the best of your situation and do what works for you. I mean, Christ, yeah, I really focused on my sleep for ages, but there are still nights where, as you say, like, I don't know, I have random coffee late at night, or I've had a couple of drinks of alcohol. I don't beat myself up anymore about it, because I did at the time because I was a really bad sleep schedule. But now we are human. We make mistakes, and these, you know, this rhythm, this natural operating.
I love how
rhythm,
you said, but now we are human. You weren't human before. Yeah, you're completely different. Like you're a lizard man.
It makes sense. It explains a lot. It does, to be honest. But we haven't got time for that in this
comments
episode.
Earlier, actually. Oh god. Yeah, so I generally agree with you. I think you're spot on, and there are lots of protocols that you can do for things like sleep, do for things like worry, do for things like eating, for instance, binge eating or not eating enough. There's lots out there to engage with. Obviously, you have to work out what your issue is. Maybe it's phone addiction, stuff like that, and that's disrupting even your flow of work. Whatever the zeitgeber is, there will be a sort of a mini protocol for it, or advice and tips around it. Generally, what I would say is that whatever change you're going to make, so just thinking about it broadly, is it's going to suck. And I say that chiefly because it's everything that your body doesn't want to do. Your body has gotten used to a certain way of being, and it's going to be like, dude, what are you doing? So like when you wake up early for the first time in a long time and you get that little headache, maybe you feel like you're going to vomit. Who knows? Maybe it's the fear of going to work for me. That's why I feel like I'm going to vomit. But we're going into that. But the point is, your body's going to fight it. Oh no. But your body's going to fight it. So give yourself a little bit of grace. You don't have to get it perfectly the first time. You don't have to do it massively. And it is touching base with reality going, this is going to be really hard.
It is. Absolutely. And it's with everything, right? Without that discipline in going through it, you won't see the benefits. If it was easy, there probably wouldn't be all this study and science on it, because we'd all be fine and we wouldn't need it.
Yeah. No one wants to know how well you sleep. No one cares, because we all do it perfectly. But it's true. It is true. And I think the problem with when you talk about a behavioral approach like this, or kind of approaches to managing aspects of your circadian rhythm, there's so many ways to slice it. So we can't sit there and be like, this is generally all you need to know. And if anyone's sitting there saying, this is all you need to know, they're selling you a bit of a con, because it's all interconnected. It's not a separate issue.
Yeah. But that in itself, I think, is that we got pretty far in from about me saying it in this simple way, but it's the awareness, isn't it, right? It's the awareness of...
Yeah, I thought you were going to say silica gel for a second, and I was getting really worried. I was like, you need to pack on it.
Not good. But no, it's the awareness, right? Build that awareness of your natural rhythm, right? Those little cues that are coming through, and then it is that intentionality. And your bit about sucking, actually, I think it's probably worth unpacking that a little more for people, because if you think about it on that neuroscience level and like the chemical level, sorry, like you've got all these little natural systems that are running a certain way, and you just want to try and change that. It is
not even just chemically. It's not even just chemically. You got to remember. So if you're, for instance, going without food, your tummy, say you're like no longer binge eating, your tummy then has to physically adjust. That's not a chemical reaction per se in and of itself. It's that it's going, actually, I'm not full. That hurts. Hunger pain is real, and that's like a thing to consider. That's going to be a difficult adjustment, and you see that with a lot of people that do diets. So it's not quite a chemical reaction purely in and of itself.
Yeah,
there are real kind of actual physiological, that your body itself is going, what are you doing to me? So yeah,
it's the stomach gremlins.
Stomach gremlins, absolutely. So yeah, don't beat yourself up. And I think if I have to think about some of the change that I've experienced with like managing my sleep or managing my diet, for instance, it was really uncomfortable. It wasn't something I'm like, yeah, I want to do that again. I want to get up at 6 a.m. Can't wait to do that.
Whoop.
Woo.
It's true, right? There is that discomfort. But actually, the really cool thing is for people is if you have got something, maybe you're someone who's going from sleep's the biggest one that we talk about here, but you're going to go from actually working a normal 9 to 5 2-day shifts, night shifts. It shows that actually you can change, you can reprogram, right? So if there's people out there that are thinking, I'm stuck in this way, or, I don't like going to the gym in the morning, I'm more of an evening, but my schedule doesn't work evenings, so how do I do this? Yeah, it's going to suck, but actually you have this quite cool internal system that will eventually help you. You just have to fight it first.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do it all the time every year when we change the clocks. You adjusted. It sucked.
I haven't.
But you adjusted. You haven't changed the clock. Oh, no. Mate.
It's
Yeah. My circadian rhythm will stay unchanged.
100%.
I am the constant.
Everyone else changes. How do you think they work out when to change the clock back to? It's my time zone.
It's true. You're absolutely right. And is this before or after you were human? I'm confused.
No. Josh, this is all about me. Okay, we don't need to unpack it before I was human.
How do I make this episode about me? It's the quote of 2025.
I'd really like to hear your opinion on how you would rate this as a wellbeing technique overall.
Overall, so I mean, it's difficult without tying it to a specific protocol. I mean, again, I'm a bit biased just because of what I do for a living and how we affect people's sleep, as well as things like eating and stress eating and stuff like that. So I'm going to go in A, but I'm going to caveat it with like, it's horrible. I hate changing my circadian rhythm. Honestly, there's something about getting up earlier than I need to, or missing like a little snack that I'm just like, man, I want to go ape. So yeah, it works. I know it works. It just sucks. But what about you? What do you think?
Well, before, when I wasn't human, it didn't really affect me. But now that I am
now that you're a mere mortal man.
From a well-being perspective, I would agree. I was teetering on a B because it sucks. But I think you're right. The benefits do outweigh. The benefits outweigh it. I think, this really is... There's so many facets to this thing that, yeah, we couldn't even discuss it in the time that we've got on here. And I think I'd encourage people to go away and look at it, get a good general understanding, and then work out if you've got a particular area that you don't think is working, go and look into that. So I think at a general well-being level, it is an A. It just comes with the things like habits and other things that you're going to need some discipline, right? Because you're not going to feel motivated every day to change it. And at sometimes it's going to suck, but long term, I mean, yeah, I notoriously now sleep like a baby. And I can hands down say it's down to focusing on that circadian rhythm.
It's nothing to do with the crib, we swear.
No, it's nothing to do with the lumptuous duck feather pillows or...
Nothing to do with that at all.
It's nothing to do with the temperature, perfect temperature control of 17 degrees with the window on the latch to...
You know, when I was in university, I swear, no, there's actually, one of my lecturers said, your brain has to be 2 to 3 degrees cooler than the rest of your body for you to get off to sleep effectively. And I was just like, how do you measure the temperature of the brain? That's crazy. Who are you, dude? Yeah, what do you know? Where am I? What?